Magnolia May Maggie Jones was pure Southern charm, born and bred in the heart of Biloxi, Mississippi. Her roots ran deep in this small town where the magnolia trees bloomed with a fragrance that seemed to capture the very essence of her spirit. Her life was a tapestry woven with sweet tea, pecan pie, and the gentle rhythm of life on the Gulf Coast. Every morning she would sit on her porch, sipping her tea, watching the world wake up around her. The Gulf breeze carried stories of generations past, and Maggie felt a profound connection to her heritage. She'd never flown in a plane before, her world comfortably confined to her small town. The farthest she had ever traveled was to the neighboring county for the annual fair. Her life was simple, yet rich with the warmth of community and the beauty of familiar surroundings. Her days were filled with the comforting routine of her work-from-home job at a tech company based in California. Despite the physical distance, Maggie had carved out a niche for herself in the digital world, blending her Southern charm with the fast-paced demands of the tech industry. For 12 years, she'd been a loyal employee, her Southern accent a cheerful presence on conference calls. Her colleagues often remarked on her warm, inviting voice, which brought a touch of Southern hospitality to their virtual meetings. Maggie knew her coworkers only through their voices and the occasional video call. She had never met them in person, yet she felt she knew them well. Their shared experiences and daily interactions had built a bridge across the miles. They were a world away, separated by miles and a whole lot of culture. The bustling streets of California were a stark contrast to the quiet, laid-back life in Biloxi. Yet through the wonders of technology, they had formed a unique bond. But she felt a connection to them, a sense of belonging that transcended geography. The laughter they shared, the challenges they faced together, and the support they offered each other made her feel part of a larger family. When the opportunity arose to finally meet her colleagues in person, Maggie felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The thought of leaving her beloved Biloxi even for a short while was daunting, yet the chance to bridge the gap between her two worlds was a dream she couldn't pass up. The thought of flying filled Maggie with a nervous flutter. She had always been apprehensive about air travel. The idea of being so high up in the sky made her uneasy. But this trip was different. It was a journey she had to take. She clutched her boarding pass like a lifeline, her heart pounding in her chest. The small piece of paper represented more than just a seat on the plane. It was her ticket to a new adventure, a new chapter in her life. Stepping onto the plane was like entering a different world. The narrow aisle, the rows of seats, and the hum of the engines created an atmosphere that was both exciting and intimidating. Everything felt new and strange, from the cramped seats to the recycled air. The confined space made her feel a bit claustrophobic, but she reminded herself that this was just a temporary discomfort. The flight attendants, with their practiced smiles and calm demeanors, seemed like beings from another planet. Their professionalism and efficiency were reassuring, a stark contrast to her own nervousness. Landing in San Francisco was a sensory overload. The descent brought a mix of emotions, relief that the flight was over, and excitement for what lay ahead. The air smelled different, a mix of salt, fog, and something she couldn't quite place. It was a scent that was uniquely San Francisco, a city she had only read about and seen in movies. The city was a whirlwind of activity, a stark contrast to the slower pace of Biloxi. The streets were bustling with people, cars, and the iconic cable cars that clanged their way up and down the hills. Despite her nervousness, a thrill shot through Maggie. The energy of the city was infectious, and she felt a sense of possibility that she hadn't felt in a long time. She was finally here, in the Golden City, ready to meet the people who had become like family to her. This was the beginning of a new adventure, and she was ready to embrace it with open arms. The company had planned a welcome lunch for Maggie, and everyone was eager to meet her. It was a chance for her to connect with her colleagues face to face, beyond the confines of emails and conference calls. Maggie, dressed in her Sunday best, felt a surge of happiness as she entered the bustling restaurant. The atmosphere was lively, filled with the hum of conversations and the clinking of glasses. Her co-workers greeted her with warm smiles and friendly handshakes, making her feel instantly welcomed. She felt like she already knew them, their voices familiar from countless phone calls and virtual meetings. It was as if she was meeting old friends rather than new colleagues. As everyone enjoyed their meal, the conversation flowed easily, with laughter and stories filling the air. Maggie, ever the charmer, regaled them with stories of life in Biloxi, her southern accent adding a unique flavor to her tales. When asked about her impressions of San Francisco, Maggie, with her heart full of genuine delight, exclaimed,
Well, I'm just tickled to death to be here in the land of fruits and nuts. The city is so vibrant and full of life.
A hush fell over the table, the laughter dying down instantly. The phrase "land of fruits and nuts" hung in the air, its impact sinking in. The jovial atmosphere shifted, replaced by a palpable tension. Her colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions turning serious. One of her colleagues, a young man with a rainbow pin on his lapel, abruptly excused himself and left the restaurant. The weight of her words had clearly struck a nerve, leaving Maggie to ponder the unintended consequences of her seemingly innocent remark. The air hung heavy with an awkward silence. Maggie, oblivious to the reason for the sudden shift in mood, smiled nervously around the table. Her colleagues, once so welcoming, seemed to avoid her gaze. Their smiles felt strained, their words clipped. The lunch continued, but the earlier warmth had evaporated. Maggie, sensing the change but unable to understand it, felt a knot of unease forming in her stomach. What had she said? Had she unknowingly committed some social faux pas? She racked her brain, trying to pinpoint the moment everything went wrong, but she couldn't figure it out. The air hung heavy with an awkward silence. Maggie, oblivious to the reason for the sudden shift in mood, smiled nervously around the table. Her colleagues, once so welcoming, seemed to avoid her gaze. Their smiles felt strained, their words clipped. The lunch continued, but the earlier warmth had evaporated. Maggie, sensing the change but unable to understand it, felt a knot of unease forming in her stomach. What had she said? Had she unknowingly committed some social faux pas? She racked her brain, trying to pinpoint the moment everything went wrong, but she couldn't figure it out. Maggie returned home that day, the knot of unease still churning in her stomach. She had no idea that the silent shift at lunch was only the beginning of her troubles. 2 weeks later, the inevitable happened. She was laid off from her job. The devastation was real, a crushing blow to her spirit. For the next 2 years, Maggie took on odd jobs, but none of them brought the same magic she felt working with her former company in San Francisco. Time passed, and just when she had nearly given up hope, she saw a familiar job posting. Her old position was open again. A glimmer of hope ignited in her heart as she eagerly applied, confident in her qualifications and experience. The interview day arrived, and Maggie sat across from the HR lady, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. But the conversation took an unexpected turn. The HR lady explained that there was a conflict within the team. Some people didn't want Maggie to return because of her take on gay rights. Maggie was floored. She had been marching for gay rights for 20 years. Confusion turned to shock as the HR lady explained the fruits and nuts comment and why it was offensive. Maggie had heard the phrase in a Lindsay Lohan movie and thought it referred to real fruits and nuts, like oranges and cashews. Realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her ignorance had cost her the job she loved, and her former coworkers believed she was a bigot. Maggie felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. She had unintentionally hurt people she cared about, and the weight of that misunderstanding pressed heavily on her heart. As she left the interview, Maggie knew she had a lot of work to do, not just to clear her name, but to truly understand the impact of her words and actions. It was a painful lesson, but one she was determined to learn from. Silence had spoken volumes, but now it was time for her voice to be heard, with understanding and compassion leading the way. Maggie couldn't undo the harm she had unwittingly caused, but she felt an apology was necessary. She made a video message and sent it to the president of the company, who had once been a colleague and friend. She asked him to share it as he felt was appropriate. Maggie didn't return to the company, but she did receive a few notes from former colleagues, which eased her mind a little. What would you have done in Maggie's situation? Would you have apologized, or left it as it was? Drop your thoughts in the comments.